Howdy Math 330. I just am making this little video to talk a little bit about this interlude experiment, which I hope you will play along and actually try it with me. So this is an activity that was planned for MnMs. I usually bring MnMs into class. I am not running to the store to get MnMs. I'm going to be doing this with a household object known as the penny. For the MnMs, we need the fact that it has an M on one side and no M on the other side, so we can tell the sides apart. With the penny, I can use the fact that we have heads and tails right there. So in this model, we are going to start by putting 20 M&Ms in a small container like a paper cup. I've got an actual cup right here to use. First, it asks us to just read the description of the experiment, and before doing anything, they would like us to at least describe what we think will happen and see if we have any assumptions about this activity. So the description of the experiment is to simply gently shake the M&Ms out onto a flat surface like a desk, or maybe perhaps even a paper plate. We determine for each M&M if it lives or dies. If the M shows up on top, the M&M dies. I'm going to let that be heads for my little pennies. Otherwise, there is life for that M&M. Upon death, you should remove the M&M from the population, count and note down the number who survive in table 1, which is on the back side of this piece of paper. Now put these fewer M&Ms back into your container for the next iteration. Do this over and over again and record your results. So I'm going to have a bunch of pennies in my cup. I'm going to toss them out. I'm going to see which ones end up heads or tails. The ones who end up heads up are going to die. The ones that end up tails up, those will survive. Now we've got to think about our assumptions and our description of this experiment. And often we have a hard time coming up with assumptions, although usually we can come up with a pretty quick description of what we think will happen. I think most of us conclude very quickly. We think eventually all of the M&Ms will die. I think you can actually make a slightly more precise description of what you think will happen. Like when you toss the pennies, about how many of them do you think will die? Assumptions can often be a little bit harder, and this is the sort of thing when you're doing science, you always want to try to think about those assumptions before you actually run your experiment. So I would encourage you to shut this video down to think about this a little bit. If you're not going to shut it down, no matter what I say, I'm just going to launch into some assumptions that we have. One assumption we have when we're playing with M&Ms is that we tend to assume that that M is actually on one side of the M&Ms, and that actually is not always true. Sometimes an M&M might not have an M on it at all, so that would be an immortal M&M, and every once in a while you'll find an M&M where there's an M on both sides, and that M&M dies off really, really fast. So without realizing it, we do tend to assume that the M&M makers have made their M&Ms the way that they intended to, and that's not always true. The pennies are a little more reliable for this. If you can find a penny with 2 heads on it, you can sell that to a coin collector for a fair amount of money. Those are really hard to find. I've never seen one. Another assumption that we have about this activity is that when we toss the pennies on one toss and then we toss them again, whatever is left on the next toss, we don't think that the results of this first toss really affect the second toss. So if a lot of them die on the first toss, that's not going to mean that fewer are going to die on the second toss. It's not going to somehow influence what has left. So that's an assumption about independent events. You may think of some other assumptions here that I have not described for you. So now that we're there, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this over. This is the table that we're going to put in. You'll see it says iteration 0, M&Ms 20. So that means that before I start, so if I'm at time 0, I have 20 M&Ms, in my case 20 coins, and I'm going to shake these up. Apologies for the noise. And I'm just going to push them out on the table. And the ones that live are the ones that end up tails up. So I am just going to pull those off to the side. That one died. That one died. Those are a bunch of dead ones. And I've got some that lived. All right. I've got some that lived and some that died. All right. It looks like I have, these are the ones that lived. I have 2, 4, 6, 8. I had exactly 10 that lived, so at iteration 1, I would fill that in with a 10. Now at this point, I'm going to encourage you to please go fill out the rest of this table yourself. Go fill out that first, go fill out the whole thing yourself, and then please think a little bit about how you would make a mathematical model for this experiment. Thank you very much for listening. I will be back soon.